We sent a copy of the recording, anonymized, to Sarah Lynn, the journalist. She didn't hesitate. Within 48 hours, a scathing article hit the front page of the local paper. Power grab at Clear Ridge, HOA. Caught plotting takeover of private lake. It featured quotes from the leaked meeting side by side with the property deed and aerial maps showing the legal boundaries. The fallout was swift and brutal. Residents flooded the HOA's email server with angry messages. A petition to recall the entire board was launched that same afternoon. Even the town's mayor weighed in publicly, calling the HOA's behavior a gross overstep with potential criminal implications. Wilkins didn't respond. He couldn't. He had vanished, literally overnight. The man who had bullied me about my boat, who had signed the violation notice taped to my property like some bureaucratic war flag, had packed his things and disappeared before the next HOA meeting. His kingdom of paper rules and empty threats collapsed with him. With Richard Wilkins gone, the Clear Ridge. HOA staggered like a headless animal, still dangerous but bleeding power fast. Karen Mitchell. His second in command stepped in as acting president, trying to stabilize the board, but it was too late for damage control. The community wasn't angry anymore. They were embarrassed. And that, as Emma reminded me, was always more dangerous. The next HOA meeting drew a full house. For the first time in years, residents who never attended before showed up with questions, documents, and in some cases, outright fury. I didn't go. I didn't need to. But several people sent me voice recordings and summaries afterward. Karen tried to steer the meeting toward healing, talking about unity and community values, but no one was buying it. One resident stood up and read aloud the leaked transcript of the board meeting where Wilkins laid out his plan to force me out. Another asked where their HOA dues had gone if the lake hadn't actually belonged to them. A third demanded to know how much had been spent on legal fees, trying to intimidate me. Karen had no answers, only platitudes. Half the board resigned by the end of the night. The very next morning, Emma and I received an email from a lawyer representing the newly restructured HOA. The tone was vastly different, measured, conciliatory, and polite. They acknowledged the court ruling affirming my ownership of the lake and requested a meeting to discuss possible collaboration opportunities regarding community access. We met at my cabin on my terms. The proposal they brought was simple and frankly reasonable. A seasonal permit program for lake access. HOA members who wished to fish or kayak could apply through a controlled process managed by a nonprofit. They agreed to pay a fixed annual amount, part of which would fund the Sullivan Lake Conservation Trust, the rest going toward shoreline upkeep and environmental education programs for local schools. I took a few days to think it over, not because I doubted the plan, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't accepting peace, just to feel like I'd won. In the end, I agreed, because it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about restoring the lake to what it had always been, a shared treasure with firm boundaries and real respect. When the new agreement went into effect, that summer, things didn't change overnight, but they changed where it mattered. The tone, the culture, the way people walked up to the lake, not like they were entitled to it, but like they were grateful it was still there. We held a quiet ceremony beneath the old oak tree near the eastern shore, the one where my grandfather used to clean fish and tell stories about the big one that got away. Judge Michael Davis, the new HOA president, stood beside me as we installed a weathered wood sign carved with the words, Stillwater Conservation Area in stewardship, not ownership. I watched as the first group of students from the local high school arrived later that week. Part of an outdoor biology class, Emma had helped organize. They waded into the shallows, collecting water samples and spotting tadpoles, while their teacher explained the lake's unique ecosystem. A few parents watched from the trail, snapping photos, smiling in the kind of quiet pride that only comes from seeing something healed instead of sold. The fishing tournaments eventually returned, but under strict terms: no alcohol, no sound systems, no marketing banners, just people and nature, and the soft splash of lures hitting water. Even Gerald Thompson's old Elite Anglers Club, rebranded under a new name, and leadership this time opening their membership to anyone willing to take a course in conservation ethics. I was invited to speak at their first meeting. I politely declined. Some things are better left to new voices. Sarah Lynn, the reporter who had stuck with this story from beginning to end later, wrote a follow-up piece titled "The Lake That Wouldn't Be Bought." It ran on the front page, again this time, framed not as a scandal, but as a rare win for common sense. And me. I took the boat out one morning not long after the permits were finalized. The sun was just creeping over the trees, mist curling off the surface like breath from the past. I brought my coffee, my grandfather's tackle box, and nothing else. No agenda, no anger, just the lake. The same lake that had waited for me to come home and reminded me that some things are only lost when you stop protecting them. Fall came slowly that year, like the world was in no hurry to let go of what we'd built. Leaves turned amber and drifted lazily across the lake's surface, gathering at the banks like old memories. For the first time in decades, Stillwater was quiet for the right reasons. Not because people had been pushed out, but because they had chosen to respect its rhythms. Word of what happened here traveled farther than I expected. A documentary crew from a regional PBS station reached out wanting to film a short feature about grassroots land stewardship. I wasn't sure at first. After all, I hadn't done this for attention. But when I saw the way they framed the story, focusing on legacy conservation and community repair, I agreed. They interviewed Ray under the oak tree, let Emma explain the legal twists, and even included a brief segment with Judge Davis, explaining how the HOA had changed its bylaws to prevent any future overreach. The piece aired under the title, "Lines on a Map: The Fight for Stillwater." I watched it from my cabin with a blanket over my shoulders, the sound of crickets humming outside, and for once I felt peace without waiting for the other shoe to drop. But peace, I've learned, isn't passive. It's something you tend. It's planting signs before they're needed, not after the damage is done. It's meeting anger with facts, manipulation with paper trails, and greed with quiet, patient resistance. It's choosing to outlast rather than outshout. One morning, I received a letter not from a lawyer or a reporter, but from a kid in Ohio who had watched the PBS segment with his dad. He wrote to say he didn't know you could actually win against people in suits, that his family had lost their neighborhood park to a developer, and he wished they'd had someone like me. I didn't know what to write back at first. What do you say to a kid who's already seen something precious taken from him? Eventually, I wrote this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay. Stay when they expect you to leave. Stay when they count on your silence, and when it matters most, stand. Winter arrived, not with fury, but with grace. Thin ice glazing the lake each morning like a protective shell. Most days, I'd light the stove early and sip coffee on the porch, bundled in my grandfather's old flannel, the same one he used to wear when walking the shoreline, reminding me that stewardship wasn't seasonal, it was lifelong. Judge Davis and I continued our work with the Conservation Trust. We implemented new measures, quiet zones for nesting birds, invasive species, monitoring a rotating patrol schedule managed by volunteers. It became more than land management. It was education, empowerment, healing. What began as one man's boundary fight turned into a living framework for how a community could coexist with its environment and with each other. Meanwhile, the ripple effect stretched beyond Stillwater. Emma helped residents in 2 nearby counties challenge their own HOAs after discovering similar abuses. One group reclaimed access to a trailhead. Another halted a condo development planned on land designated as protected wetlands. Emma joked that we'd accidentally started a movement, and maybe she was right. As for the old HOA leadership, Richard Wilkins was still a ghost story, whispered about at council meetings. Karen Mitchell resigned quietly and moved out of state, her name now a cautionary tale for would-be opportunists. Their development firm, Lakeview Legacy Holdings, dissolved within 6 months of the court ruling, leaving behind a trail of lawsuits and unpaid debts. The new board at Clear Ridge eventually asked if they could install a commemorative marker at the trailhead that led to the shared shoreline. I approved it. On one condition, they had to include the original survey boundary and a note that read, "Maintained in partnership, protected by truth." There are still mornings when I catch myself watching the water too long, wondering how close we came to losing all of this. How many places had been lost because no one stood firm, and what might have happened if I'd ignored that first violation notice, shrugged, and walked away, but I didn't. And now when kids throw stones into the ice and parents teach them to skip across its surface, I know they're not just walking on water. They're walking on something earned.